Buenas tardes a todos. Voy a ser extraordinariamente breve. Solo unas palabras para daros la bienvenida al Museo del Prado, para agradeceros vuestra presencia, para señalar lo contentos que estamos en el Museo del Prado de poder desarrollar una actividad conjuntamente con la Fundación de Francesca y con el Museo Thyssen. Aunque somos vecinos, somos colegas, tenemos una magnífica relación. Y aunque este es un museo que, estrictamente hablando, no es un museo de arte contemporáneo, pero ninguna manifestación artística nos es ajena, y menos cuando se trata de un artista del calibre de Jonas. Simplemente, pues nada, decir que es un verdadero honor y un verdadero privilegio tenerla aquí y que el Museo del Prado sirva de receptáculo para su performance y que lo disfruten como estoy convencido que vamos a disfrutarlo todos. Muchas gracias.
I really want to thank Miguel Falomir and Ana Molinas for this invitation to come to the Prado, because I know that this is a real big, wonderful dream for all of us, because this has been a long journey. Since 2006, Joan joined as a fellow TBA 21 Academy, which is an offshoot of TBA 21, which is a foundation I hope you'll all be hearing about all more and more, so that you know what TBA 21 is. And the Academy is a different beast altogether, that does artistic research, which is completely dedicated to the oceans. And as in next year, that will be inaugurated in Lisbon, the UN Decade of Ocean Science, we dedicated this year's program to the oceans. And the Academy, which has invested in this subject in particular, looking at the oceans through the lens of art. They had a convening at the Kochi Biennial now in 2016, and it was at that moment that Ute Metabauer, the then curator, and also guest curator Stephanie Hassler, who is sitting over there, doubling up as a stagehand this evening. It's a long-term dream of hers, but I want you to give a big round of applause to Stephanie Hassler. And that was actually the initiation at the Vasco da Gama Square in Kochi. This was the inaugural performance of this work. And Joan, who, as you all know, has layering many, many different facets of this program, but these performances are an integral part of the creation of the work that is exhibited Moving Off the Land 2, which is exhibited at the Thyssen-Bornemisza Museum. So I'm so happy that we had this opportunity to show this work there in its final rendition. But these performances are opportunities to look at the imagery that Joan has collected over the years in filming in numerous aquariums around the world, and in particular during her residency at the Alligator Head Foundation in Jamaica. She worked together for many years with Professor David Gruber, who's a foremost marine biologist, who has shared quite a lot of his knowledge and his sensitivity to the way the ocean creatures perceive each other in the ocean. And as Joan says, we came from the ocean, and she's quoting also Shakespeare in that respect. But there's so many different layers of this performance. I don't want to talk about it too much because it speaks for itself. It's a true honor to welcome to the stage Joan Jonas, whose work we love and admire. And I know that just walking into this room, the frisson of excitement, all of you want to welcome her onto this stage. And thank you so much to the Prado for making this possible. Thank you.
Hola. I'm so happy to be in Madrid, to be in the Thyssen Museum and in the Prado. And I'm going to repeat a few things that Francesca has just said, because it's part of my, I don't usually introduce my work, but this started out as a lecture demonstration. And so this is the way it begins. Thank you, TBA Academy, the commissioner and producer of this performance. It was first shown in Kochi, India, in the Vasco da Gama Square, which for me was very thrilling because a lot of local people saw it. And thank you to my team, David Sherman, Sakina Gavigan, and particularly to Uta Mehta Bauer, who first invited me. Thank you also very much to Stephanie, who's in a double role tonight. I'm happy to be collaborating with the composer Iko Mori, and the second performer is Francesco Migliaccio. The singer in the video is Ande Sambi, a Sami human rights activist lawyer from Norway. The children in the video are Zora Kasabir, Noah Delarme, Lila Gavigan, Malcolm and Jonas Moran, and Willa Schwabsky. These 100 fish drawings I made about 6 years ago in Kitakyushu, Japan, thinking of how much fish we eat. And the Japanese, of course, how much fish they eat, but we all eat a lot of fish. The work is composed of footage shot in Lofoten Islands, Norway, the New England Aquarium in Boston, the New York Aquarium, the National Aquarium in Baltimore, the aquarium in Genoa, the aquarium in Mystic, Connecticut, and various aquariums in Tokyo. Black and white octopus recordings by Jean Painlevé. I want to say particular thanks to the marine biologist David Gruber. The biofluorescent footage of sea animals are recorded by David with his special camera and lenses. Underwater swimming recorded in Jamaica by Cynthia Beat. Footage accompanying the Jamaican fishermen recorded by Francesca Thyssen-Bornemisa. My special thanks to George Williams and the other Jamaican fishermen. Literary sources include Rachel Carson, Emily Dickinson, T.S. Eliot, Peter Godfrey Smith, Herman Melville, Cy Montgomery, Neil Shubin, newspaper, radio, and internet. And finally, thank you to Francesca Bornemisa and Marcus Raymond. I begin by, performance is dedicated to Rachel Carson. And so there's a little section that I love that I couldn't find a place for, so I'm beginning the piece with that. Many young shrimp will find and approach the dark bulk of some loggerhead sponge and, entering it, will take up the strange life of their parents. Wandering through its dark halls, they scrape food from the walls of the sponge. As they creep along these cylindrical passageways, they carry their antennae and their large claws extended before them, as though to sense the approach of a larger and possibly dangerous creature. For the sponge has many lodgers of many species: shrimps, amphipods, worms, isopods, and their numbers may reach into the thousands if the sponge is large. And so I knelt on the wet carpet of sea moss and looked back into the dark cavern that held the pool in a shallow basin. The floor of the cave was only a few inches below the roof, and a mirror had been created in which all that grew on the ceiling was reflected in the still water below. Underwater that was clear as glass, the pool was carpeted with green sponge. Gray patches of sea squirts glistened on the ceiling, and colonies of soft coral were a pale apricot color. In the moment when I looked into the cave, a little starfish hung down, suspended by the merest thread, perhaps by only a single tube foot. It reached down to touch its own reflection, so perfectly delineated that there might have been not one starfish, but two. The beauty of the reflected images and of the limpid pool itself was the poignant beauty of things that are ephemeral, existing only until the sea should return to fill the cave. The mind evolved in the sea. Water made it possible. All the early stages took place in the water. The origin of life, the birth of animals, the evolution of nervous systems, and the appearance of complex bodies that made brains worth having. When animals crawled onto dry land, they took the sea with them. The brain is deeper than the sea, for hold them, blue to blue, the one the other will absorb, as sponges, buckets do. Neptune or Poseidon, gods of water, rivers, springs, the sea, and the horse. How does myth arise? We all come from the sea, and we have memories of it in our minds and in our bodies. For all the fish in the sea. Cod were once so abundant that you could almost walk across the water on their backs. The semicircular canals. In our ears, in fish ears, the structure of semicircular canals are almost exactly the same. We come from the same source. The whale. The eye of the whale is like ours, a camera eye. Whales came onto the land. They developed feet, they walked on the land, and then they went back to the sea. Half the world's wildlife after 40 years. fished half the fish. In March, 2 marine biologists published a study of giant manta rays responding to their reflections in a large mirror installed in their aquarium in the Bahamas. The 2 captive rays circled in front of the mirror, blew bubbles, and performed unusual body movements, as if checking their reflection. They made no obvious attempt to interact socially with their reflection, suggesting that they did not mistake what they saw as other rays. As a biologist who specializes in animal behavior and emotions, I've spent the past 4 years exploring the science on the inner lives of fish. What I've uncovered indicates that we grossly underestimate these fabulously diverse marine vertebrates. The accumulating evidence leads to an inescapable conclusion: fishes think and feel. At low tide, frill fins hide in rocky tide pools. If danger lurks, a hungry octopus say, the goby will jump to a neighboring tide pool with remarkable accuracy. How do they avoid ending up stranded on the rocks? A series of experiments dating from the 1940s found something remarkable. They memorized the tide pool layout while swimming over it at high tide. They can do it in 1 try and remember it 40 days later. So much for a fish's mythic 3-second memory. Tool use was once thought to be the sole province of humans, but the behavior has now been discovered in a wide range of animals, including fishes. The enterprising orange-dotted tuskfish of the western Pacific first uncovers a clam by blowing water on the sand, then carries the mollusk in its mouth to a nearby rock and smashes the clam on the rock with a series of deft head flicks. On reefs, collaborative hunting has developed an astonishing degree of sophistication. A grouper has been observed inviting a moray eel to join in a foray, communicating by head-shaking gestures or a full-body shimmy. The 2 fishes probably know each other, for individual recognition is the norm in fish societies. If a grouper chases a fish into a reef crevice, it uses its body to point to the hidden prey until the slender eel goes after it. If the hapless quarry escapes to open water, the grouper is waiting. Both partners dine more often by working together. How do we know being petted feels good to a fish? They ask for it. Friendly groupers swim up to divers to receive strokes, and moray eels will cuddle with trusted divers. Even some shark species love getting face and belly rubs from experienced divers. Don't try this yourself. We have driven many charismatic mammalian species to a point where they are in peril of extinction, and so it is with many magnificent fish species like cod, swordfish, Atlantic halibut, and the scalloped hammerhead shark. As innovative research reveals new facets of the private lives of fishes, I am hopeful that perceptions will change and will show them more mercy. The simplest way to help fishes is to reduce our consumption of them and to source what we do eat from suppliers that adhere to animal welfare standards. As Sylvia Earle, who no longer eats fish, says, "The ocean has given us so much for so long, it's time to return the favor." Fish, amphibian, and reptile, warm-blooded bird and mammal, each of us carries in our veins a salty stream in which the elements of sodium, potassium, and calcium are combined in almost the same proportion as in seawater. The mermaid, the Syrian Atargatis, goddess of Syrian origin, the first known mermaid, worshipped by people living in the Mediterranean Sea, half human, the great mother and fertility goddess of the earth and the water. Doves and fish are sacred to her. Doves for love, fish for fertility and life of the waters. Her upper half human female, her lower a fishtail. Not far from her temple was a lake filled with many varieties of fish, her sacred animal. These fish sometimes were even ornamented with jewels. They knew their names and would come when called. They would snuggle up to people to be petted. Perhaps it was a mermaid that persuaded Zeus to put the image of the fish in the stars, creating the constellation Pisces. I have seen them, riding seaward on the waves, combing the white hair of the waves bone black. When the wind blows the water white and black, we've lingered in the chambers of the sea by sea girls, wreathed with seaweed red and brown, till human voices wake us and we drown. The seahorse is completely encased in an armor composed of interlocking bony plates. These take the place of ordinary scales and seem to be a sort of evolutionary harking back to the time when fish depended on heavy armor to protect them from their enemies. On the Syrian coast, they told of their goddess plunging into the sea because they saw a moon descend into the western waters. The Mexican Coxcox, or fish god, was either a solar or lunar deity. He somewhat resembled Noah, for the Mexican fable related that, in the time of flood, when the earth was covered with water, he rescued himself in a cypress trunk and peopled the world with wise beings. It is curious how widely spread is the belief in fish women. The prevalence of tales of mermaids among Celtic populations indicates these water nymphs as having been originally deities of these peoples. I believe that the circular mirror they are usually holding is a referral to the moon disk. Conducted from northern Asia by a manfish. Once upon a time, in the season of opening buds, the people of our nation were terrified at seeing a strange creature resembling a man riding upon the waves. He had upon his head long green hair, resembling the coarse weeds which mighty storms scatter along the margin of the strand. Upon his face, which was shaped like a porpoise, he had a beard of the same color. But if our people were frightened at seeing a man who could live in the water like a fish or a duck, how much more were they frightened when they saw that from his breast down he was actually a fish, or rather two fishes, for each of his legs was a distinct fish. And there he would sit for hours, singing to the wandering ears of the Indians the beautiful things he saw in the depths of the ocean, always closing his strange stories with these words: "Follow me and see what I will show you." One day, this lady, as she was called, discovered her old cap in a corner. She took it up and looked at it, and then thought of her father, the king, and her mother, the queen, and felt a longing to go back to them. She kissed the babies and then went down to the Strand with full intention of returning after a brief visit to her home. However, no sooner was the cap on her head that all remembrance of her life on earth was forgotten, and she plunged into the sea, never to return. But far beneath this wondrous world, upon the surface, another and still stranger world met her eyes as we gazed over the side. For, suspended in these watery vaults, floated the forms of the nursing mothers of the whales, and those that by their enormous girth seemed shortly to become mothers. The lake, as I have hinted, was exceedingly transparent, and as human infants while suckling will calmly and fixedly gaze away from the breast, as if leading two different lives at the same time, and, while yet drawing mortal nourishment, be still spiritually feasting upon some unearthly reminiscence, even so did the young of these whales seem looking up toward us, but not at us, as if we were but a bit of gulfweed in their new-born sight. Floating on their sides, the mothers also seemed quietly eyeing us. One of these little infants, that from certain queer tokens seemed hardly a day old, might have measured some 14 feet in length and some 6 feet in girth. He was a little frisky, though as yet his body seemed scarce yet recovered from that irksome position it had so lately occupied in the maternal reticule, where, tail to head, and all ready for the final spring, the unborn whale lies bent like a Tartar's bow. The delicate side fins and the palms of his flukes still freshly retained the plaited, crumpled appearance of a baby's ears newly arrived from foreign parts. As when the stricken whale that from the tub has reeled out hundreds of fathoms of rope, as, after deep sounding, he floats up again and shows the slackened, curling line buoyantly rising and spiraling towards the air, so now Starbuck saw long coils of the umbilical cord of Madame Leviathan, by which, The young cub seemed still tethered to its dam. Not seldom, in the rapid vicissitudes of the chase, this natural line, with the maternal end loose, becomes entangled with the hempen one, so that the cub is thereby trapped. Some of the subtlest secrets of the sea seemed divulged to us in this enchanted pond. We saw young Leviathan amours in the deep. The sperm whale, as with all other species of the Leviathan, but unlike most other fish, breathes indifferently at all seasons. After a gestation, which may probably be set down at 9 months, producing but one at a time, though in some few known instances giving birth to an Esau and Jacob, a contingency provided for in suckling by 2 teats, curiously situated, one on each side of the anus, but the breasts themselves extend upwards from that. When by chance these precious parts in a nursing whale are cut by the hunter's lance, the mother's pouring milk and the blood rivingly discover the sea for rods. The milk is very sweet and rich. It has been tasted by man. It might do well with strawberries. And thus, though surrounded by circle upon circle of consternations and affrights, did these inscrutable creatures at the center freely and fearlessly indulge in all peaceful concernments. Yes, serenely reveled in dalliance and delight. But even so, among the tornadoed Atlantic of my being, do I myself still forever centrally disport in mute calm, and while ponderous planets of unwaning woe revolve round me, deep down and deep inland, there I still bathe me in eternal mildness of joy.
Everything need to be protected.
Yes.
Everything need to be protected. So we have to just look at this as a holistic thing to protect the environment around fishing industry. And until we really get to that era of protecting, then I don't think we'll be here talking much about this. Because at least we will see. When I was a young man growing up, I tell you the truth, there were some things that I could not have followed because I used to love to go to sea with their fishers. And when they used to see the elder fishers, when they draw the trap, they would take the little fish and they would throw them back. You understand? Growing up, we don't really see these type of fishers practice. If they catch a fish, their fingernail, they want to take it home. You understand? So I don't know. There are so many things. There are things within. I work with the fisheries division, and there are sometimes when you go to take data, it is just so sad to look at the size fish. And when you look at the mesh, every fisher who set a trap supposed to fish with an 1.5 inch size mesh. But there are fishers who still use 1.25 inch, 1 inch. And only these type of a mesh will catch these type of a fish. For the net, you are supposed to fish with 2.5 inch. Some of these fishers, they will tell you, I use this for catching sprat. But it is not really for sprat. They just go where they see an amount of juvenile fish, and they just, because they want to have money and they want to catch a big catch and all of these things. But they are not looking at the future. And that is where we really need. We have to help in educating because of the department I work with. And as a fisher, I tell you, I come to the time now where we have to really put some measures in place and serious about it. Until we're serious about it, I don't really believe that we will be saving the industry at all. We have to be serious about it. laws are there to guide whether the special conservation here or other method, then I think we have to, you understand, put these measures in place and deal with them strictly.
Lungfish, shark, paddlefish, gray mullet, hatchetfish, moray eel, catfish, carp, sunfish, pufferfish, triggerfish, tuna, spearfish, swordfish, herring, trout, dogfish, gullfish, flying fish, butterfly fish, mud skipper, garden eel, pike, squid, viperfish, octopus, frogfish, scorpionfish, dolphin, skate, sturgeon, bass, carp, pollock, sole, angler, sardine, anchovy, cod, halibut, lobster, perch, manta ray, butterfish, pilotfish, jellyfish, seahorse, stingray, guppy, salmon, glass eel, discus fish, grouper, albacore, angelfish, bream, shad, shrimp, plaice, turbo, turtle, coral, flounder, pike, mackerel, starfish, dragonfish, sea urchin, moon jelly, mangrove snapper, manatee, sunstar, star coral. We returned to Octavia. He put the squid on the end of the long grabber so that he could hold the food right in front of her face. She seized the squid and the tongs. I ran up the steps to the tank, stubbing my toe, and plunged both arms into the water. She dropped the squid. She'd wanted the tongs, and now she wanted me too. While holding fast to the side of the tank with hundreds of suckers and still holding the tongs in dozens of others, Octavia grabbed my left arm with 3 of her arms and my right arm with yet another of hers and began to pull hard. Her thorny red skin showed her excitement. Her suction was strong enough that I felt her drawing the blood to the surface of my skin. My hands were immobilized. She kept me at arm's length, but at least I could see her head. It was now the size of a cantaloupe, and each arm was at least 3 feet long. She had grown dramatically since my previous visit. The giant Pacific octopus is one of the world's most efficient carnivores in converting food to body mass. Hatching from an egg the size of a grain of rice, weighing 0.3 of a gram, a baby giant octopus doubles its weight every 80 days until it reaches about 44 pounds, then doubles its weight every 4 months until maturity. An octopus's muscles have both radial and longitudinal fibers, thereby resembling our tongues more than our biceps. But they're strong enough to turn their arms to rigid rods or shorten them in length by 50 to 70%. An octopus's arm muscles, by one calculation, are capable of resisting a pull 100 times the octopus's own weight. In Octavia's case, this could be nearly 4,000 pounds. Octavia was using only a tiny fraction of her great strength. Compared to what she could do, this was just a playful tug. I didn't feel I was under attack. I felt I was under investigation. After what felt like a considerable time, suddenly, she shrank from us. She let go of me and the tongs at the same moment. Wilson fished a capelin out of the small plastic bucket of fish he had positioned at the lip of Octavia's tank. Flushed with excitement, Octavia flowed immediately over to him, not just extending an arm or two, but rushing toward him with her whole body. Her head bobbed to the surface so that she could look into our faces. She looked us both directly in the eyes and then accepted the capelin. As she conveyed it toward her mouth, 3 of her arms rose from the water, and she grabbed Wilson's free hand with some of her largest suckers. I plunged my hands and arms in, and she grabbed me too. 1 arm, 2, and then a 3rd attached to me. I could feel the suction of the suckers, but her arms did not pull me. We were drowning in sensation. The feeling of Octavia's suckers on her skin, the spectacle of her subtly changing color, the possessions of the capelin as they were passed forward to her mouth, the unconstrained acrobatics of her many disjointed arms. 6 of us were watching her, and 3 of us had arms in the tank. Before anyone noticed what had happened, she had managed to steal the bucket of fish right out from under us. She was holding the bucket fast with some of her strongest, biggest suckers, while using hundreds of suckers to explore the 3 of us. Octavia wasn't interested in the fish. They were still in the bucket. She was holding it in such a way that the fish in the bucket faced away from her. She drew the webbing between her arms around the bucket, almost like a hawk hides its captured prey with its wings. Octavia was more interested in the object that held her food than even in the food itself. The most dramatic similarity is the eyes. Our common ancestor may have had a pair of eye spots, but it did not have eyes like ours. Vertebrates and cephalopods separately evolved camera eyes with a lens that focuses an image on a retina. There's a transparent cornea, and the iris regulates the light to the retina. The octopus has a wide-angle panoramic vision. Each eye can swivel independently, but they could only see clearly for about 8 feet. The octopus lives outside the body-brain divide. Fish are unaware they are in a tank. The octopus knows it is confined. They try to escape, and they often do. See, about, 8 years ago, I was teaching a performance video class at MIT, and I called the class Action, Archaeology of the Deep Sea. And so the students, by the way, did their own research and made work in relation to that subject. We visited the New England Aquarium, my students and I, and one of the first rooms we went into was a room in which there were tanks on either side of the room. On one side was a tank with an octopus in it. On the other side was a tank with a lot of fish, actually. And the attendant told us that they were having, at one point, very recently, they had a rather complicated situation where they'd come in every morning and there'd be a fish missing. And they had no idea how that was happening. They didn't see any signs. Where did the fish go? So they decided to leave a camera, a video camera in the room and have it play overnight and record what happened during the night. Well, what they saw the next day was the octopus pushed back the glass on his tank, crawled up and down the side of the tank, walked across the floor, climbed up the side of the fish tank, pushed the glass back, got in, got a fish, climbed out, pushed the glass back, down on the floor, across, up, into his tank with his fish, pushed the glass back, ate the fish.